Um, when did you realize that you had to make the family album, the Port of the Generation? At a moment in an interview, um, you had this moment that you had to do this, but when did it actually happen?
Well, in a way, I think that when I started making this film, I thought that everything that I had made before was a work in progress or material for this film. Because I had dealt with some of the subjects of this film, but here I put everything together. And of course, in the beginning, the film was only like about the group. It wasn't a very autobiographical film in itself. That was due to the circumstances of being diagnosed with cancer, which changed everything. So it's a film really about death, you know, and near death.
So when do you started working in the film specifically?
I started working on the film 5 years ago, and then the first day of shooting, I got sick. So that changed the whole thing for me. And there was, so the film had to be made like not as a continuous shooting, but throughout the years.
And what was it, where that decision of documenting also your odyssey in the hospitals came from? As part of also the project, did you have the idea of documenting it? It was clear for you that it was part of the project, or you completely documented separately and then just joined them in the editing room later?
No. As soon as I got the news that I was sick, I decided that this film would not only be about my past, but about my present. So being sick was my present, you know. And so I started documenting that, and my friends started recording me. And that's how it came about. In the beginning, I thought the film was a film told by a survivor. Then when I got sick and almost died, I started thinking that it was a film of a dying man, in a way, because I didn't know how the end would be. In a way, I say it's a suspense documentary in which you don't know if the director is going to die in the middle of the movie or not.
Can you talk us about the editing process? It seems that was the most challenging aspect of this film, putting everything together. And it seems you had a lot of access to material, photographs, films. How do you compile first all the material, and how was the editing process?
Well, all my life I've saved things, you know, photographs, videos, films, everything. With that attitude that one has that says, maybe one day this will become useful for something, you know. And they sort of stay there, these archives, and they age like wines, and there's the moment when there's the right moment to drink them, you know, to use them. So I had these films, starting with my father's, where I'm filmed at the age of 3 until the present. And I kept, I have a lot of material. We had more than 200 hours of material, counting archive material and the material shot for the film. And the editing process was, we would edit a little bit, then sometimes we would film, or sometimes I had to go to the hospital. It was on and off, on and off. And the whole editing process was very long. It was, including the classifying the material and editing, it was like 2,400 hours, which is a long time.
How do you come up with the decision of dividing the film in sort of 5 big chapters, prologue and the epilogue?
I never work with a script, so my films are really films done in the editing room. But usually my films, my latest films have that structure. I like my films to be like a book, because I think the duration of films, the concept of duration of films has changed. Now you can see a film, or many people see films like they are reading a book. They can read the prologue and put it away, and then go back to it, because the whole film exhibition concept has changed since the multiplex and all these things. And now with the TV series, it has changed more, in that people just stay a whole weekend watching, I don't know how many chapters of a TV series, you know? So, and the final end of films usually is in DVD, and people, that's the way they watch films. So I wasn't worried about making a long film. In fact, many of the films that have come out in the last years are very long. Homeland is 6 hours. Miguel Gomez, 9 hours, is it? Yeah. Yes. Or the Philippine films that are 7 hours, you know. So, and also I thought it would be my last film, so I took my time.
Just before we open the floor for questions, I just want to ask you, throughout your work, humor and reflexivity are constant. You always turn the camera back, and there's a lot of humor in your work. Can you talk a little bit about that? Can you elaborate on the use of humor and reflexivity in your work?
Yes, I think that humor in films is the thing that you can most enjoy with an audience. I mean, you can actually hear people laugh, and that is very rewarding, you know. Sometimes people cry, but they don't make too much noise, but that's very rewarding. And I also like changes of tone, from very serious things to very humorous things. That makes it lighter for the spectator, I think, as well. And when I started seeing documentaries in the 50s and 60s, they were so serious, you know. This was the old type of documentary where everything was very serious, and the voiceover, and now documentaries have developed in a way that regular dramatic films haven't developed. I mean, the classical narration of Hollywood had its peak in the 1950s, and ever since it has been going down, 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 down. Whereas films have evolved a lot, mostly from technological changes, especially after the 80s, you know? Because of lighter equipment and more autobiographical films started being made, more intimate conditions. In fact, the two films before this one, I did all I was the only, I was a one-man crew, did the sound, the camera, everything. And that gives me a lot of freedom, because I don't have to deal with lunches, transportation. And in this film, I decided to make the whole film in my house, or in the hospital, which was my house for a while.
Great. Let's open the floor for any questions. Anybody? Any questions, comments? Let's see. Okay, let's start. Okay, yeah.
So, number one, how is your health? And number two, is this really your last film?
Well, at one moment, I think it was going to be my last film, and now I say it's my latest film. In fact, I made a very short film after this one. It's only 3 minutes long, but it's about people with cancer. It's for a web doc, a feature-length project in which 10 directors made 3-minute contributions. So that was quite easy for me to make after going through that experience. At the moment, I don't have any further projects. I feel like very drained after you have exposed yourself so much. It's difficult to go back and and think of other ideas. At the moment, I'm just living with this film, traveling with it, showing it to audiences, sharing it with other people. No, I worked with like modules sometimes, because sometimes you don't have the inspiration to finish a whole sequence, so you just edit part of that, put it aside then, and go to someplace else. So my films are really done in the editing room. And I really like to work with archive material. I don't enjoy very much shooting films now, I don't know why. Especially with fiction films. I retired from making fiction films because I don't like the power structure of fiction films where 60 people are dependent from what you have to do at that moment, and costs and budgets and all that, and logistics. But yes, I work in bits and pieces, and then they all come together at the end. And for this film, I just started with the title, you know. Sometimes I start just by the title, and I get the idea from it.
Can you talk about the title?
The title, in fact, comes from a script I wrote with Sandro Romero in 1985. That it started with that phrase, and you see it in one of the archive materials. And all of a sudden, well, throughout the time of making the film, it would gain more meaning, no? This year is the 50th anniversary of T.S. Eliot's death, and that's why there's the quote there. And he insists on this thing that in my beginning is my end. And it's a concept that exists in lots of cultures and philosophical texts. And yeah, it's a contradictory. Then the end, when I decided to make the film, I said to myself, I want a film that will start with the end. There was a problem here with the projection. The first seconds went black, but I like the idea of starting with the end, because that puts the audience in a very strange position. And the film ends with a picture start. No? It's like a circular thing.
There was a question back there. And yeah.
I didn't have anything to do with that film. I saw it, I didn't like it. But when at one point, Sandro Romero and I were like the persons in charge of publishing the work of Andrés Caicedo. And we insisted to his father, who was alive at the time, that none of his works should go to the cinema or television. But then things changed, and they got the rights and made the film. I think that Que Viva la Música is a novel like The Catcher in the Rye, which is very difficult to put on the screen. And I understand why J.D. Salinger was always so adamant and so against the adaptations of his work, because just one short story was made into a film. It was terrible. And after that, he even decided that the covers didn't even have photographs or graphics, no? Because a book is a book. And I think that classics like this should be left alone. It's better to make a movie from a bad novel than from a good novel. No, the proof is the Lady from Shanghai or whatever. So many films are proof of that. And so I think the problem with the adaptation of the Que Vio la Música is that they changed the time it takes place. It's a film that is anchored in the 70s, and it's very tied in with the music of the Rolling Stones. And these people didn't have any money to buy the rights for the Rolling Stones. So it's an anachronism, really, to set the film in the present doesn't make sense. I mean, for a young lady from Cali to discover salsa in the present, my God, it's been around for more than 30 years or 40. Somebody asked me about my health. I forgot to answer that. So far, it's all right. I have to go back to medical exams. But I feel that all my life I had the sword of Damocles on my head. I mean, because I've been a sick person from different sicknesses. And I have always felt that I was in danger of death, like I say as a child, you know. I was obsessed with dying. But yes, I mean, living is having the sword of Damocles in your head, you know. It's always there. You want to translate?
Sure. You had mentioned that you don't want to do, have to do anything with fiction film, but I read in your Facebook that you've been interested in Luis Angel.
Luis Angel Mera, I'm surprised somebody remembers him. He was a singer that had a very tragic end. He's not very well known, but I have not been interested in doing anything about him. I already did a documentary about the first real great classical composer in Colombia, which was Antonio Maria Valencia, who was like the founder of the whole cultural movement of Cali.
Four more questions. Let's start from back here. I mean, here. This audience member was part of the original Ciudad Solar group. How many members are still alive?
I don't know, because I've lost sight of some. I've heard that some have died. I don't know, that was so long ago. What's your name? Maybe I remember you. Arango. Oh, he had an exhibit at Ciudad Solar. Yeah. Well, so many people went by Ciudad Solar. It was the open house all the time. That, and after my house became that, you know, people would just come. And very strange people as well.
Sure.
First of all, thanks for
Well, I was the first film teacher in Cali at the Universidad del Valle in 1979. And the Universidad del Valle has been like the place where most of the good filmmakers from Cali come from. You're showing here La Tierra y la Sombra. He went to Universidad del Valle. Los Hongos, Oscar Ruiz Navia. And these people, these young people, feel an affinity with us, because, I mean, we became like references for them, and that making films was possible. Now it's very easy to make films, but when I started, it was very, very difficult. Now everybody's into filmmaking. And I don't know why people from Cali are so have the cinema within them, because the first silent feature film was made in Cali in 1921, which was Maria. I made a film about that film. The first sound film was made in Cali. The first color film was made in Cali. The first anti-imperialist film was made in Cali, which was only found in the 1980s. It's called Garras de Oro, made in the 20s. So I don't know, maybe there's something. I have my own theory about it, that maybe we have talent to make films in Cali because we move slowly, but our eyes move rapidly.
Okay, back there. Oh.
Yes, well, I think that Samuel Beckett is more handsome than I am, but it's a compliment anyway. But yes, I'm obsessed with death, and I think that almost any documentary filmmaker has to be obsessed with death, because we're in the process of filming things that are dying. Everything that we shoot is going to change. It's going to, if you film a building someday, it's going to be torn down. If you film a person, he's going to die. And so we work with memory. And for me, the absence of memory is death. So we, as documentaries filmmakers, are like struggling against death, against being forgotten, you know, against oblivion.
Well, we'll take one last question. Sure.
It hasn't been released in Colombia. It's going to be, the premiere of the film is going to be at the Cartagena Film Festival in March. And then it's going to have a limited release in the country because of its length and being a documentary. It's very unlikely that any commercial venue will be very interested in showing a 3.5-hour film where that takes away their 2 slots of their time. And anyway, documentaries, films don't have a big audience really in Colombia. But I think that with a limited release, it's a film that if it's given time, it can last several months in a theater. And obviously, then it can go to television and DVD and bootleg.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you,
Luis.
Carlos.
Thank you for
Thank
coming.
you for coming.